Chapter 6. Pasteur's Choice to Benefit Mankind. Louis Pasteur's success in studying Monsieur Bigot's problems with beetroot fermentation came to the attention of the Emperor of France. Napoleon II requested Louis Pasteur's presence at the Royal Hall in Paris. Louis, as a good French citizen, obeyed the Emperor's orders. Napoleon III was the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, the great French military leader. Napoleon III spent his childhood moving from one country to another to avoid the enemies of his family. When he tried to return to France as an adult, his rivals captured him and sent him to prison. However, he made a dramatic escape and fled to England. Only 2 years later, after a revolution in France, Napoleon III ran for the presidency. In a free election, he received an overwhelming victory. 5 of every 6 people voted for him. As a young man, Napoleon III received an off-and-on education in a half-dozen different countries. Despite this, he ranked as one of France's most intelligent rulers. For one thing, he avoided war with England, which had led to his uncle's defeat at Waterloo. Rather than fighting the British, he entered into trade agreements with them. What his uncle had failed to win on the battlefield, Napoleon III tried to win by means of trade and commerce. During his reign, France enjoyed a remarkable period of prosperity. Napoleon III told Louis Pasteur, "France has 5 million acres of land devoted to vineyards. Wine is one of France's most important products. We have commercial treaties with many foreign countries. They have agreed to buy our wine. It is an important source of money. Yet our export trade is suffering because our wines go bad during shipment." The emperor handed Louis a letter. This letter from an English businessman tells the story. Napoleon III said. Louis read the letter. "The sale of French wine is not as widespread as it should be," the English businessman wrote. "The reason is simple enough. At first, we eagerly welcomed your wines, but we soon had the sad experience of too much loss caused by the diseases to which they are subject." The emperor said, "Our exports are threatened because disease ruins some of the wine. The wines of Jura become acid, those of Bordeaux turn sour, those of Burgundy become bitter, those of Champagne become ropey. We lose vast sums of money." Louis said, "You wish me to learn why the wines go bad?" "Yes," Napoleon III said. "You must not only find the cause, but also learn how to prevent it." People assumed that faulty chemical reactions caused the appearance of undesirable products in wines. As a well-known chemist, Louis Pasteur was the logical choice to solve the mystery. Rather than tackling all wine diseases at once, Louis Pasteur aimed for a solution to one particular problem. He chose to work toward a remedy of sour wines, the most common problem. Sour wines contain too much acetic acid. Acetic acid often ruined red and white wines in the area around Arbois, where Louis had been raised. He traveled there to work on the problem. The people of the town welcomed him. After all, Arbois was not only famous for its vineyards, but also for being the boyhood home of the great Louis Pasteur. The mayor of Arbois made Louis an offer. "I have the town council's approval to place a laboratory at your disposal. We'll pay all of your expenses." Louis Pasteur spoke to the city council. "This offer from a town dear to me does much to honor my modest labors. However, I fear my service might be less than the generosity of the townspeople. I would be ashamed to accept your offer if my labors proved fruitless." Louis gently declined their offer. Instead, he asked, "Please help me find a vacant building where I can work." Louis and his laboratory assistants found an old coffee house at the entrance of the town. It was a short distance from his father's tannery. Pierre Duclos served as Louis Pasteur's laboratory assistant. He looked at the deserted building. "It has neither running water nor gas," he pointed out. "Nevertheless," Louis said, "we shall set up the laboratory here. We can carry fresh water from the town well and heat the place with a little charcoal brazier. We can make tables by laying plain boards across sawhorses." Pierre Duclos' duties included emptying ashes from the brazier, sweeping the floor, and washing laboratory glassware. The washing he did in the tiny Cuisance River that flowed by Jean-Joseph Pasteur's tannery. As for scientific instruments, Louis Pasteur once again used simple, even primitive, apparatus. He designed the equipment on the spot. Pierre Duclos took Louis's drawings to blacksmiths, carpenters, and tinsmiths. The local craftsmen constructed the special equipment for Louis. The old building still carried a sign announcing it as a cafe. Travelers occasionally stopped for food or drink. They would come to the door, look around, see the strange equipment, blink their eyes in disbelief, and leave. Less observant visitors would blunder into the cafe, sit down in an unoccupied chair, and wait to be served. Pierre Duclos escorted these people out and gently sent them on their way. Pierre would take the confused customer by the hand and lead him to the door. "We are closed now," he would say. "Please go into town, where you'll find a cafe that is open." Louis Pasteur seldom noticed these interruptions. He would look up from his work with a blank, uncomprehending expression. He remained lost in thought. Many of the residents of Arbois had wine cellars. Louis knew these people well, since he had grown up with them and attended school with them. They willingly gave him samples of their wine, both good and bad. As a chemist, Louis knew that acids could be neutralized by alkalis. He could eliminate the acid taste by mixing exactly the right amount of an alkali in the wine. One such alkali was bicarbonate of soda. He tried mixing it into a bottle of spoiled wine. Louis, for all his great skill as a chemist, could not tell a good wine from a bad one. He left the taste testing to his assistant. "Phew," Pierre Duclos said. "Now it has an unpleasant salty taste. This will never do." Louis said, "We must discover a way to eliminate the acid yet not spoil the taste of the wine. We shall find what caused the wine to go bad in the first place." Louis Pasteur and Pierre Duclos visited the vineyards and wine distilleries. They questioned workmen, followed the grapes from the vines to the vats to the barrels and bottles. They collected samples at each stage. Fermentation of grapes took place in casks that contained crushed grapes. Unlike fermentation of beetroot sugar, the vineyards did not have to add brewer's yeast to grapes. However, Louis did find yeast in the casks. Wild yeast covered the skins of ripe grapes. The yeast fell onto the grapes from dust in the air. Louis studied a drop of the wine under the microscope. How did the bad wines differ from good ones? Louis remembered his work with the beetroot sugar. Tiny bacteria caused it to spoil. Might not microscopic life cause the disease of wines too? He wondered aloud. The culprit turned out to be Mycoderma acidae, a type of bacteria. Louis Pasteur traced the chemical change of alcohol to acid. Tiny Mycoderma acidae took oxygen from the air and combined it with alcohol. The oxidation of alcohol gave acetic acid. He dictated his notes to his wife. She transcribed them for him. Besides the welcome and useful yeast, Louis said, other much less beneficial microorganisms fall into the vats. The unwelcome microorganisms come from the grapes, leaves, and branches of the vines. Some may come from the hands of the grape pickers. At first, the fermentation process keeps them in check. However, as the yeast cells complete their work, the foreign bacteria start growing. As the wine ages, the harmful bacteria grow and reproduce. They cause diseases of the wine. The winemakers stubbornly believed that oxygen from the air caused wine to spoil. Wine exposed to air would not age properly, they believed. Following this principle, they took pains to protect the wine from the air. Your methods are right, Louis told them, although your reasons are wrong. The enemy is not the oxygen in the air, but microorganisms which are carried by the air. They invade the wine barrels, causing various wine diseases. In addition to Mycoderma acidae, Louis found other foreign bacteria in bottles of the bad wine. He could examine the wine and announce beforehand whether it was good or bad. In the case of bad wine, he could even describe how it would taste. This sample will be sour, he predicted. How do you know without tasting it? The grape growers would ask. Louis said, in good wines, they're only a certain type of yeast microorganism. In the bad ones, there are other microorganisms. A specific bacterium causes each kind of disease. What can you do to get rid of the disease germs? The wine growers asked. Well, that's the next problem, Louis admitted. The germs grow because conditions are right for them. The wine is the right temperature, and it has the proper nutrients. Pierre Duclos wondered, how can we keep the bad ones from growing? Maybe we can kill them by mixing an antiseptic into the wine, Louis said. An antiseptic is a chemical that kills small living organisms. The chemical must kill the bacteria and be harmless to humans, Louis said. Pierre Duclos added, it must also leave the taste and smell of the wine intact. Finding the right antiseptic proved to be a much harder problem than Louis imagined. Despite exhaustive tests, he never found a chemical that would serve his needs. We simply can't add chemicals to the wine, he decided at last. The taste and smell of the wine is too delicate to withstand even the most inoffensive chemicals. Duclos began cleaning up the mess. He recorded the final notes on their series of antiseptic experiments. He closed the laboratory books. Louis Pasteur hadn't given up. Instead, Pierre knew that Louis would disappear into his own head into deep thought. Tomorrow, Louis would come in with a dozen new ideas to try. On March 21st, 1863, Napoleon III requested a progress report. Louis told of his efforts to date. My assistants and I have tried 2 methods of preserving the wine. First, we added chemicals to neutralize the acids. Second, we added antiseptics to destroy the harmful microorganisms. Neither method proved effective. Adding chemicals is not the answer. What can you do? Napoleon III asked. Louis offered still another idea. I shall let the good yeast finish and then heat the wine gently for a few minutes. This will kill the bad microorganisms before they ruin the wine. Back in the cafe laboratory, Louis tinkered with the heating process. He told Pierre Duclos, we must find a happy medium, a temperature that destroys the microorganism but doesn't cook the wine. We'll heat the wine just before it is bottled. This will avoid further contact with the air and keep fresh bacteria from it. Louis announced his plan to the wine growers. He said, I have shown that heating it for a few minutes at 50 degrees Celsius to 60 degrees Celsius does not harm the wine. The wine growers drew back in disbelief. Heat will destroy the taste of our wine, they cried. No, Louis Pasteur said. The few minutes of heating is harmless. I do not propose a long and dangerous heating, but a quick and gentle warming with the wine protected from the air. His assurance did not convince them. Louis had to show in some dramatic way that his process did work. We'll put it to a public test, Louis said. He heated some kegs of wine and left others unheated. Professional wine tasters drew samples from both kegs. Even the experts couldn't tell the difference. As a more dramatic test, Louis asked the government for help. The Minister of the Navy supplied a ship, the Jean Bart, for a 10-month voyage. Before it sailed, the crew loaded barrels in the hold of the ship as if for export. When the vessel returned to harbor, they rolled out the barrels. Once again, the professional wine tasters drew samples. This time, the taste of the 2 wines did differ. The wine treated by Pasteur remained good. The untreated wine had changed for the worse. It has sharp, almost acid flavor, the wine tasters reported. Although it is still fit to drink, it will soon spoil entirely. As another experiment, the frigate La Sibylle left on an around-the-world tour. It carried a complete cargo of heated wine. This dramatic test met with complete success. In 1866, Louis summarized his discoveries in a book, Wine and Its Maladies. The word malady means ailment or sickness. The Pasteur process of partial sterilization with mild heating could also be used to preserve milk, cider, cheese, and countless perishable beverages and foods. The process became known the world over as pasteurization. The word entered the major languages of the world. Pasteurization became a household word. Louis not only invented the process, but he designed industrial equipment for heating large amounts of milk at low cost. He took out patents to protect the rights of his discovery. This process will make you a wealthy man, his friends assured him. Louis was not well-to-do. He and his wife and children lived in humble circumstances. He always had to scratch for money to equip his laboratories. Would this discovery be the end of his financial worries? For several nights, the gas lamps burned late into the night at the Pasteur home. Louis and his wife talked about the matter of profits from the pasteurization process. Marie sometimes worried about how she would run the household on her husband's meager salary. All of that would be behind her, except... No, Louis decided. I became a scientist to bring chemistry to the benefit of mankind. I shall release the patents to the public. Pasteurization turned out to be an important advance in the history of science. Yet, Louis Pasteur made not a cent from the discovery, nor did he earn any money from his development of large-scale industrial equipment devised for pasteurization. During these studies, Louis Pasteur made a remarkable discovery. He found bacteria that could live without oxygen. Life in the absence of air. Scientists had long taught that oxygen is responsible for life. Even fish, which live in water, must have oxygen. Their gills extract life-giving oxygen from the water where it is dissolved. Respiration, or breathing, is similar to combustion or burning. In respiration, living things extract oxygen and combine it with food to provide the energy to keep the body going. In combustion, fuels react with oxygen and burn, releasing energy as heat and light. Everyone assumed that all living things must have oxygen to live. Bacteria were no exception. Not so, Louis Pasteur told astonished biologists at the Academy of Science. I have found a type of bacteria that can live without oxygen. In fact, oxygen is a poison to these microorganisms. This remarkable discovery came about like this. As part of his study of fermentation, Louis looked at butyric acid fermentation. Butyric acid is what gives spoiled butter its terrible rancid smell. In a drop of fluid from rancid butter, he noted microscopic organisms shaped like rods. The rods moved rapidly about by wiggling to and fro in the fluid. The rods near the edge of the drop, those in contact with the air, became still. Those near the center of the drop raced about in all directions. Normally, bacteria crowd near the edge of the drop to be close to the life-giving oxygen, Louis told the Academy of Science. Yet, these bacteria flee from oxygen. They cluster as far from the oxygen as they can. When I bubble oxygen through the fluid, it immediately kills the microorganism responsible for butyric acid. Louis Pasteur gave the name aerobic to microorganisms that needed oxygen and anaerobic to those that could not tolerate it. Scientists had not even suspected the presence of anaerobic bacteria. Louis showed that they are an important part of the food chain. They cause the breakdown of dead animal and vegetable matter. They restore those elements to the soil for reuse by new life. Anaerobic bacteria also cause food to spoil and dead animal matter to decay. The terrible smelling decomposition of beef bouillon, rotten eggs, and meat is the result of anaerobic life. Gangrene is the decay of human tissue damaged by disease or injury, such as frostbite. Gangrene is due to the action of anaerobic bacteria. For centuries, people supposed that the rotting of trees and the slow breakdown of flesh and bones were the result of physical actions. Louis Pasteur showed that decay is a chemical reaction. It is brought about by anaerobic bacteria too small for a person to see with the unaided eye. Louis Pasteur described an unusual world for his fellow scientists. Imagine a world in which these bacteria do not break down organic matter, Louis told them. If microscopic beings were to disappear from our globe, the surface of the Earth would be littered with dead organic matter. Life would become impossible because death would be incomplete. The principal elements of living beings would be virtually indestructible if one were to eliminate from the profusion of God's creatures the smallest and apparently most useless. But then, life would become impossible if the return of all that has ceased to live to the air and to the mineral kingdom were suddenly suspended. The bodies of dead plants and animals are returned to the elements out of which they were formed. This is a scientific expression of the biblical statement, "For dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return." Genesis 3:19. Lewis's study of science helped him admire and worship God. Lewis said, "The more I study nature, the more I stand amazed at the work of the Creator. Into his tiniest creatures, God has placed extraordinary properties that turn them into agents of destruction of dead matter." The luck that favors prepared minds once again favored Louis Pasteur. He set out merely to study what made wines go bad. He limited himself to acid wines. His discovery of the process of pasteurization cured all of the sick wines, not only the acid ones. In addition, he applied the discovery to milk and many other food products. He showed that microorganisms cause food to spoil. Or, as Louis Pasteur said, "The role of the infinitely small in nature is infinitely great."